Today's guest is Allison Williams. She is a practicing attorney who practices in New Jersey, and she has been practicing for 18 years. And when she went out on her own, she was doing what most attorneys do. She was hustling, working, overworking, until that overworking literally almost killed her. And thankfully, that was a huge wake-up call for Allison that she had to change the way she was doing business. And quite frankly, there were a lot of attorneys who that wouldn't have been a wake-up call. They would have just kept going back to work. But thankfully for her, she said, this isn't working for me. She got a great business coach and changed the way that she ran her practice. And now she not only runs her practice, but she coaches other attorneys on what she did that made her practice run successfully without the chaos and without overworking. And her coaching business is called Law Firm Mentor, and there'll be a link later on. So please welcome Allison Williams. Okay, well, welcome, Allison. And so tell me, you've been practicing 16 years, right?
18 years.
18 years. Okay, sorry, 18 years. I know. So you're a veteran. And we're going to be talking today about coaching. And I know that might sound completely self-serving since Allison and I are both coaching and making our living off of coaching, but just hear us out, okay? We're just going to be talking about coaching and why attorneys need coaches, how to find a good coach, what to look for, and what coaching can do for you and what it can't do for you. So, Allison, tell me about when you started your practice. You went quickly. I mean, you shot through the roof quickly. And that was in part based on you getting coaching. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So tell me about that. Tell me about that experience.
So it's interesting. I've learned a lot through working with different coaches, and the coach that I credit with kind of giving me the greatest mindset boost and understanding myself the best is a guy named David Nagel. And one of the things that I learned from David is that the way that you reprogram your subconscious is either through constant repetition or through a traumatic event. So I unfortunately did the latter.
I'll always pick the traumatic event, please.
Right?
Thank you.
That's me. That's Miss Traumatic Event. So I started my law firm, and I was a very successful attorney by the time I went out on my own. I had a book of business of about $500,000, which I know is not the classic experience of lawyers going out. But the relevancy of that is that I had learned before I became a business owner things that I didn't know I was going to need to know when I became a business owner. I had kind of become what you would refer to as an unconscious competent, right? So I had learned to kind of fuddle my way through, and I was like, this is what works in order to get clients. This is what works in order to increase my prices. This is what works in order to keep people coming through the door. So I figured, okay, great. I'll be fine when I get into business. I'll just now do it on my own. And I was, for the most part, I was a senior associate in someone's law firm, but I was the only one who practiced in my practice area. So literally, when I decided to leave, it wasn't like the clients have a choice and the clients can stay or leave. I mean, we told them that, but like if you stayed, there was going to be malpractice, right? So all my clients came with me, and all of a sudden I'm flooded with setting up their files, and my secretary is supposed to come, and she opted out at the last minute, which was its own little trauma. So I start, and I'm kind of going, and I'm going. Went out with a partner, very poor choice, but we divorced amicably. And then I'm really in business on my own. And very soon after, we separated our practices, I realized that I was completely overwhelmed. I mean, I remember the poor ADP girl, she came in to set up my payroll, and my previous partner had set that up in our partnership, and she was going through all the options. And like at some point I literally just stuck my head down on the table and I started crying.
Right.
And I couldn't stop crying. Like I felt so awful for her. Like at some point she literally just got up and left. And I called my accountant afterward. I was like, I did something to Kim. He was like, I know.
It broke her.
She called, are you okay? I was like, no, I'm not okay. But I ultimately said, let me stomach through. And I started going. And the traumatic event was that at some point I had hired and fired the most incompetent people. Like I literally just Do you have a pulse? Can you work? Okay, great. I'll pay you. I'll pay you to make my life better. You say you're fabulous. I believe you. Let's go. Right. And
so here's how I used to hire. You can do this, right? Yeah. You're hardworking, right?
Right.
Okay. All right. You're done.
There you go. Right. So I hired that way. And lo and behold, that was not wise. And
what could go wrong?
And after the third person, I finally said, you know what? There's just there's no competent people that want to work for me. So fine, I'll do this on my own. And I lived about 40 miles away from my office. Long story how that happened. But I had a long drive to work. So I said, okay, I'll be a secretary from 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning till 8, a lawyer from 8 to 6, and a secretary again from 6 to 8 or 9. And then I'll drive home, rinse and repeat. And I did that schedule for an extended period of time. It was probably about maybe close to 4 weeks before I just hit the wall. Yeah. After like 80, 90-hour weeks, I literally was at the point where I'm existing on like NoDoz and caffeine, and I'm just kind of wired. And at one point, I thought I had been given a gift from God because I got the message that all of my cases on Friday had been adjourned. I had 3 cases in 3 counties, and something happened on Thursday while I was in trial. And my secretary told me, oh no, your day is completely adjourned. So-and-so had a cancellation. Judge so-and-so moved your cases, etc. So I was like, great, I'm going to sleep late. I am going to stay in bed till like 7 o'clock in the morning. And I'm going to come into the office at a reasonable hour. And then I'm going to leave at 7 o'clock at night. Right. I was so excited to have only a 12-hour workday. So I'm planning for it. And I stayed in a little bit later on Thursday so I could get ready to go home and get that good night of sleep that I hadn't had for so long. And it's kind of like, when you're anticipating something, there's like all this pent up energy, and it surged in my body. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go home. I'm going to go home. And I remember I got in the car and I just started driving faster and faster and faster. It was like, I just couldn't get there fast enough. It's like the person out in the desert that's just craving the water. And I just remember opening my eyes and I was about this far away from a guardrail. And that was, first of all, I know that if I had had an impact at that speed and in the car I was driving, that I would have died. But I woke up, and when I had that moment, it was kind of one of those, oh my God, how did this happen? Because I remember the wheel was thrown, and I'm shifting off into the middle of the highway to try to avoid the guardrail. And this is one of those moments where you say, Jesus, take the wheel. Like, he took it, I didn't ask because I was asleep. But yeah, so that was terrifying. So I kind of got out of the car and gave my expletives to the world. Like, why are you doing this to me? I'm a good person. Why is everybody else able to do this? Why not me? And I decided I didn't want this. I was like, this stuff's for the birds. So I called up several friends at large law firms and said, here, I'll bring you $500,000 and a work ethic like nobody's business. And I want to go back to being a lawyer, screw this ownership thing. And got myself a lucrative offer. And I was literally going to sign the papers when I realized, I don't know if I really want to do that. What's going on? So
that little voice, that little inner voice.
Reversed that decision and decided to keep my law firm. But I said, if I'm going to keep it, it can't kill me. So something has to give. And I went searching. And I started working with a business coaching company that wasn't necessarily my cup of tea, even though I did learn a lot there. And then I shifted over to working with David, and just through some very strategic guidance that he gave me and really understanding what was going on under the hood. I didn't get the cheerleading, accountability, hand-holding type coaching that I personally offer, as well as the type of coaching that David offers, but I got what I needed, right? So it's partly just kind of sensing what's really going on and continuing to tap until you tap the right location, and then everything kind of blows open.
It's amazing to me that you even knew that it was out there, because I started practicing in 2000, and there wasn't, that I knew of, there wasn't anything like that out there for attorneys. Yeah. No one I knew had a coach. I mean, we had Jay Foonberg's book. That's it. Right? That was all you had. And it wasn't for, probably, I don't know, 5-6 years in that I learned about Atticus. And then that was the only thing. And I did Atticus and it was great. And I recommend it. But there wasn't business coaches for lawyers out there. So how did you even know that this existed?
Well, I didn't. I mean, I went online looking for management assistance. Like I thought my problem, I think what happens is like with a lot of lawyers, we try to solve the problem that we had and we don't realize that the problem is interconnected with all the other problems, right? So if you feel like you don't have enough clients, you go try to find a marketing solution. Or if you can't convert your clients, I don't know very many lawyers that actually seek sales solutions, but they'll be like, well, how can I change what I'm saying? Like, how can I communicate differently? Or if you have a problem with hiring, I just need somebody to teach me how to hire, right? And and I can't tell you the number of lawyers that come to calls with me or my team that will say, oh, my problem is just this. I'm like, all right, well, here's 90 questions I can ask you. And if you have all these other things dialed in, then yeah, your problem is just this. And it never is, right?
Bless your heart. You don't have a clue.
So I thought my problem is I don't need to get more clients. And if a person comes to me, because at that point, I pretty much owned my marketplace. I handled child abuse and neglect cases. And unless you were working for the public defender's office or charging people $25 an hour, you weren't getting that work. I was getting that work at $500 an hour. So I knew I needed to continue to bring clients in, but by that point, I pretty much just existed and got clients in, right? So I really knew that I just needed to like get control of the chaos that was in my business. And I knew how to create systems. My mind thinks in terms of systems. That's why people know me for crushing chaos in law firms. But I didn't know how to go about the process of institutionalizing that while I was still a practicing lawyer, while I was having to hire people and train people and manage people, while I was trying to organize the systems in the business at the same time. And I really needed someone to guide me to that. So I really went looking for management help, right? I was like, if somebody could help me manage all of this, right? Then I'll be okay. And, what you start to do is you start to get something because, anything is better than nothing, right? So if you don't have any clients, someone who teaches you how to get any clients is beneficial. But what I learned pretty soon into the process and started to follow different people was that I started to hear about the coaching industry, and a lot of it resonated on a spiritual level. So I started hearing things about, not just mindset, like have a positive thought, but like how to organize your thoughts, how to rewire your thoughts, how certain things are universal laws. I started to learn about that. And that really appealed to me as a recovering Catholic. So I followed that. And then I said, okay, well, how does this fit with the law? And what I realized was that some people were kind of using universal law principles and kind of spewing them at you in a way that was negative, I'll say, and not intentionally. I think some people just don't have a deep enough understanding of it. And then what they end up doing is they just kind of talk in sound bites. And so people get the sound bite and they're like, oh yeah, I can apply this over here. And it's like, there's a whole lot more that you have to apply. You can't just attract a client and poof, you're done. Like there's more to this than that, right? And it resonated with me on such a deep level, but I didn't know, honestly, what coaching was or how to use it or how it would affect my life. And in fact, I remember the first expense I made, the first major purchase of coaching I spent was $20,000. And it was for a VIP day. So I'm thinking $20,000 for a day, like, what is that? Like if I divide my, by the hour, because, we think in terms of hours, right? I divide by the hour, like that's thousands of dollars an hour. And then I remember asking the question like the week before the VIP day, like, I had to fill out forms to prepare and all of that. And I go and I was like, all right, so, I'm going to fly in at this time. And I figured I would have to stay over because it's going to be so late. And they're like, oh, no, it's only 4 hours. I was like, and then I just felt raped. I was like, I spent $20,000 to get 4 hours. I was like, this better be the best. You better like transform me. And so I'm like, great, $5,000 an hour. Like I charge $500 an hour and people think I'm high in the market. Like this guy charges $5,000 an hour, right? But I remember being there, and after like an hour and a half, I was like, man, is it over yet? Like, I don't know how much deeper we can go into all
right. Like I'm full. So I want to back up for a second because, and congratulate you. And I'm not blowing smoke here. I mean it. I run into a lot of attorneys. I'm sure you run into them. We're attorneys. And we get into this, I'm smart, which is true. No one's saying you're not smart, people. And I should be able to figure this out on my own. And we're cheap. Okay.
All of the above.
So how did you get over that hump? It sounds like pretty instantly, especially if your first thing is 20 grand out of the box.
Well, that wasn't my first thing. That was my first major purchase.
Major. So how did you get over, especially when, we're go-getters, you're a go-getter, I'm a go-getter, get over this, I can do it myself, and why would I pay you when I can do it myself? Yeah. Ridiculousness.
Well, and I say this without any tongue in cheek. I really was the benefit of having that traumatic experience, right? When you have something that becomes your make it or break it moment, this is it. Like there's no further place to go. Like almost dying when people say my law firm is killing me. Like, yeah. My law firm literally almost killed me, right? So there was no choosing not to solve the problem. It was one of those things like when the house is on fire, there is no choice but to either flee the house or put the fire out. You can't just stay there or you die. So I had the benefit of that, and that helps me to make the decision. And one of the things I tell lawyers a lot is a lot of times people would say, well, but you had all this money, so you could easily go out and blah, blah, blah. And here's the thing, like, this is the reason why I can speak with such confidence about this. Money is not a finite resource, but your mindset around money can create finality and a sense of limitation around money very easily. So even though I would keep $50,000 or $60,000 in the bank, I was terrified to spend it. I didn't put myself on payroll for 2.5 years. Like I had a 7-figure business before I put myself on payroll. And even then it was an instruction from my coach that I said I was going to do and didn't really do. And then I did it. And then I took myself off and put myself on, took myself off. Like, there was a lot of story wrapped up in how money functions. And I thought it was absolutely the only thing you spend money on is people and clients, right? And you get a little bit of what's left over. And that conceptually,
maybe.
Maybe. That's where my mind was. So the first time that I made that investment, it was going into the bathroom at the event and crying, and I have to get the help. I can't do this without the help. It feels like the right thing to do, so I'm just going to do this.
But it was scary as hell.
It was terrifying. And I'll tell you what the worst part of it is, because, and this is a subtext that I think a lot of people are not aware of that's running beneath the surface. It isn't just that you're afraid to spend the money. Like, yes, intellectually, that's where your mind goes. But what it is that a lot of us, because we are smart, and because a lot of us have been told our whole lives how smart we are, what tends to happen is there's shame and guilt wrapped up in not being smart. So when you go out and say, I don't know, I have no idea how to, or even when you ask questions of lawyers and the answers that they give is they give an intellectually sounding answer. But then when you unwind it, there's like a anger or a resentment or a frustration that comes up because it feels like the value that I have as a lawyer is how smart I am. So if you take that away from me, I'm no longer who I am, right? So it becomes an identity crisis for a lawyer to say, not only do I not know, but I not know, and I'm going to publicly tell you and tell others I didn't know by virtue of associating with someone to help me. And then I'm going to take all that intellect and I'm going to be told to suspend judgment rather than just disagree with everything that I hear. I'm going to take it in, I'm going to consider it, and I'm going to see results on the other side. And that faith element that comes in where you have to take someone else's protocol, process, experience, marry it to what you are currently doing it to make it your own, because, I'm a family law attorney. So no, I can't give you the law firm in a box for your criminal defense firm or your public or your personal injury firm, but I can teach you how to grow a business, right? So you have to use that intellect that you have, but you have to suspend the how and just trust that on the other side of the process that we give you, that it's going to utilize all of your talents and make you into something better. And a lot of people don't want to hear, it really is about the faith that you have in yourself and the strategic advancement, the information that we give you. It becomes really about, either you're going to give me something that I'm going to now be able to build my business, or you're going to take something from me, you're going to take away a problem for me. And that's not really what it is. And a lot of people that call themselves coaches don't understand that. So they're like, oh, I learned how to do something. Now I can just copy and paste my formula and give it to you, and you'll pay me lots of money and you'll get the same result. And there are people that are successful working with that type of coach, but that person isn't really coaching you. That person is just giving you information that you're paying for. And you're doing the exact same thing. You're just not aware of the how. So the problem with that becomes you can't replicate it in the future. So as soon as they don't have a formula that fits with whatever it is that you want to accomplish, it stops working.
Well, and that's why, I, as you know, on my Facebook group, you're a member and you see the questions. This is about flat fees. And there's questions on there, not every day, but what's the price? What do you charge for X? Does anybody have a fee agreement for, and I mean, I want to scream. I'm like, oh my gosh, first of all, like we have members literally all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
What? First of all, like, what are you even talking about? Why would somebody in Kansas know what you should be charging in Manhattan or Uzbekistan? Literally, we have people all over the world. And I mean, it boggles my mind. And how is that helpful? How is that helpful to you? They're not going to be on the initial with you for the next. Anyway, I think that you being in the pain, for me, when I have people apply for my program, they have to, we have a scale of essentially a scale of pain.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not an 8 or above, we stop the conversation. Because I have found that exactly like you're talking about, people are far more willing to sit in the comfort that they know, even if it is literally killing them, even if it means that they make $100,000 a year when they could be making far more, even if it means they're working 60, 70 hours a week when there's no reason for them to work more than 30. Mm-hmm. They'd rather sit in that comfort zone when the truth is known than move and be uncomfortable for a period of time.
Yeah.
Because if you're doing the work, it's going to be uncomfortable, and it can be uncomfortable for, a good period of time. It's scary.
Well, so I think there are people that have I don't want to work that hard. I don't want to pay that much, right? There's definitely those people.
Well, good luck to you then.
And I would say I don't want to say they're the majority of our profession, but there certainly is more than a small percentage of our profession that has that, right? But then there are the people, and I find this much more often in the calls that I have had with people, and even my growth strategists. Like all of the meetings are recorded, so I go in periodically and say, what was going on with this person that they didn't say yes, not because I want to make a sale, but because if I've been interacting with a person online for a while, I kind of know what things they've been talking about. And I kind of want to see, did we not serve this person, or was there something that we missed? And what I usually find is that people get scared, right? Mm-hmm. So you take them from the top of their intellect to the bottom of their emotions, and they get closer and closer and closer to it being about them. And then what ends up happening is that you unearth something. So it's not just, okay, sure, I don't have a process for hiring people. Well, okay, so if we were to guide you through a process of hiring people, would that benefit you? Oh, yes, that's what I need. Okay, well, tell me about what you've been doing with hiring so far. And then they lead you down a path that shows that they chose people that liked them, that they didn't know how to set appropriate boundaries, I'm
laughing because it's never about the hiring people. It's never about the charging. It's never about the thing that they think it's about.
Right. It's always about who the person is, but who they are shows up in these different ways. And so you have to start with where they are and then guide them to the core. And when we peel off the layers and people start, so it's the fact that I feel unworthy of having someone who's a rock star because I only have a $100,000 law firm instead of $1 million law firm. Oh, okay. And then when people encounter that, when they first look at themselves, right, they're looking in the mirror and they're seeing themselves, it's painful. Yeah. And one of the things that I don't do, and I'm very clear with my team that no one is to do, is lie to people and say that pain will go away as soon as you sign on the dotted line and you start building out your systems or you start marketing or
you just started feeling it, baby.
Right. You have to be in that feeling for a moment to recognize the value of changing it, because what will happen is if you actually evolve, if you go through the process the way that I want people to go through the process, and there's a lot of process, right? We have a process for how to think through writing an ad. And it's not just who do I want and what do I need to put on paper? It's who are you and who are you bringing in and what are you creating and what's going to be your legacy? And all of those things go into a process, right? So when people go through this process, they evolve because they start thinking about things differently. And the more you practice the experience of thinking about things differently, the more powerful the outcome is on the other side, because then it becomes institutionalized memory for you. And the next time you have to do something, oh, this is how I think about things like this. And over time, your thinking evolves to the point where you immediately know what the solutions are, no matter how big the problem is, because you're looking at things differently.
Right. You're changing from the inside out.
Right.
Yeah. And what would you say when people are scared to make the investment? Because what I hear sometimes is just like anything else in life, you've got to do the work and make the investment first, and you're not going to see the payoff immediately.
Right.
You know, it's like losing weight. You know, you go for a hike and you come back and you expect to, you know, the scale to move.
Suddenly, like, why can't my pants fit?
Wait a minute, I ate well for 2 days. What the heck, you know? And it's the same thing with coaching. And we're only as good as you are open. You know, we coaches are only, our work is only as good as you are open to doing it and change. So I try and emphasize, you know, that's not the way life works. You've got to make the investment first, right?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I like to tell people is that, you know, especially for people that are working with us on a more significant basis, if they're working with us in one of our annual programs, I tell them, I want you to think about how small the investment is relative to the return. Because whenever you talk about investment, I've seen in some of the Facebook groups, people say, oh, when people use investment, that's a way to avoid talking about the price. And I'm like, no, you know, the price is what you pay. You pay a lot more than dollars and cents, right? You pay with your time, you pay with your heart, you pay with your blood, your sweat, your tears. You're paying in that sense, but you're also investing. And when you invest, you get a return on your investment. So we actually break it down for people and we go through the math, right? So the easy thing to do is to say, you know, what is one client for you? Well, one client pays me $2,500. Okay, so what if you could get to a place where one client paid you $3,000? Would that be beneficial for you? Well, yeah, okay. And what if I could tell you that if you were to employ these strategies, you will consistently bring in more than one client extra a month? Would one client extra a month be beneficial for you? Yes, okay. For less than the cost of one client a month, you can get a program where you have unlimited access to multiple coaches, where you get training, where you get programs, where you get live events, you get online training, you get materials. Would that sound like something that would benefit you? And then when you look at it that way, it becomes oh, I'm not paying X dollars for the hope and the prayer and the wish and the opportunity. I am making an investment in my business that is going to return me far more than what I'm paying.
Well, what is the cost to not doing it?
Right.
What is the cost to not doing it? And I've heard some like, well, I tried coaching before and it didn't work, or that program. And you know, that's unfortunate. I can't speak to those. And, you know, that's going to happen. But if you own a business, you have to invest in the business and you have to try different things. And that includes, quite frankly, different coaching. And one of the most impactful things for me about coaching was when I was a student in trapeze. We would have different coaches, and these are all top of the line coaches. About half of them either had been in Cirque du Soleil or were in Cirque du Soleil at the time, which in the circus world is, you know, the cream of the, you don't get more top rung. And they would teach us something. And, you know, one coach, they're all teaching the same trick for me, you know, for each student. Like for me, I'm working on this trick. So I would have 4 or 5 coaches, whoever was working, try and teach me this one trick over the course of months. And one coach would say one thing and like, it just clicked. And literally it could have been the same thing that, you know, 4 other coaches have been telling me. And for whatever reason, the way they said it or the way they showed me, it clicked. And so I was like, you know, it's beneficial to have more than one coach, maybe not all at the same time or whatever, but this idea of like, this person's the only person to go to, I'm like, try out different things. And, this coach might just work better for you. And now there are a lot of attorney coaches out there. Mm-hmm. And for me, it would be difficult to be able to judge who's who and what's what. Mm-hmm. And I know that we have a mutual acquaintance, Andy, and he talks about, he was teaching marketing, mm-hmm. and he had an employee who at the time was 20. And this guy took Andy's stuff, went out and started coaching, mm-hmm. using all of Andy's stuff. And the kid was 20, saying that he had been doing this for 12 years. He'd been teaching lawyers how to market since he was 8. It's absurd. And he didn't last long, and, blah, 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 blah. What has been your experience in who's legit, who's not, maybe who has some great idea but doesn't quite fit? Mm. And for me, a lot of it is kind of the smell test. Just my gut and instinct. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so intuition definitely plays a big part in it, but I think there are definitely some things that are markers, right? So the first thing that you should always be looking for is, what is the outcome that you desire? Because I think a lot of times we listen to the solution to the problem that we want instead of the big picture outcome. And the reason that's important is lots of lawyers can teach you how to market, or how to hire, or how to sell, right? You can learn the thing, but remember, like, everything is interconnected. So there's no way for me to teach you marketing without also having some impact on the number of clients that are going to come into your business. And that then necessitates a system, and the number of systems that you have is going to impact your time, which is going to be available for strategic management, which impacts your leadership, which, so there's a lot of different pieces that go together in an ecosystem of a business. So when you go to someone and you say, is this the one that I should work with? A lot of people are like, well, how do I feel with the person? Like, is it warm and fuzzy? Do I like the way that they're going to be teaching me? And a lot of times it's not the one that makes you feel the best or the one that you're most comfortable with, but it's the one that's achieved the thing that you want. Because the very first time that I really, really invested, like, said, I'm going to work with this person, I'm going to follow this person, I'm going to do what he says, I'm going to pay a lot of money, I'm going to be all in. This person was a white male. I'm a Black female. He was a high school graduate, no college degree. I have 3 degrees. He grew up in a non-traditional divorced family with a lot of trauma. I grew up with mom and dad still married 51 years this year.
Wow.
So we could not be more different, right? He grew up in the North. I grew up in the South. Like, literally, you could just tack off all of the demographics about a person. But when I heard the person and I said, what is this person saying? And where did they go? And I saw the outcome that he was able to achieve. And he said, the way that I think about things leads me to this outcome. Yeah. And it leads my clients to this outcome. So if you're able to talk to a person and see that they got to a place where you want to be, and that they ultimately have a way of getting there, not just they landed where they got, right? Because some people could wake up and inherited wealth, and you could certainly have the amount of money and have a family system and ecosystem that actually taught you how to generate that money without having to do anything beyond simply being who you are. Then you don't need that, right? But for most of us grew up somewhere between working class to middle class to upper middle class. We didn't grow up wealthy. So we don't know how to naturally generate wealth. And you have to have someone who can actually teach you that. So that's number one. The next thing is, when you start hearing a lot of these people that the only thing that they can market is what they have done for themselves, that's a problem. Because one of the things that I'm really clear with people about is, not everybody wants the life that I created for myself.
Right.
Not everybody should have the life that I created for myself. I created it for me, right? You may want to spend your weekends with your husband and kids. I love to work. I didn't want to be a workaholic, and I didn't want to die because of my work. But I certainly, if I have my choice on a Saturday, I'm going to want to research something. I'm going to want to read something. I'm going to want to study. I'm going to want to be in the breath of creating something. Like, that's who I am at my core. You, who you are at your core, have to find what that is for you. And whatever it is for you, we want to help you to create a business that allows you to have that, not a business that allows you to work the way that I work.
Right.
So if you're hearing kind of that copy and paste, oh, I have, a multi-state practice. If you want to have a multi-state practice, come over here. It's like, okay, if I don't want to have a multi-state practice, but I like the model that you're using, is that the right choice for me? Because you're going to help me to create something that I don't really want. And then I'm going to have something that I don't want, and I'm going to be at a place that doesn't fulfill me.
Yeah.
So that's a biggie.
Yeah. My own experience with coaching, one of the reasons that I coach, probably the biggest reason I coach, is because I love it, number one, and I'm good at it, but coaching has changed my life. And I think that's what people don't understand if they're new to the coaching world is a good coach. One question from a good coach can move the needle. Mm-hmm. I mean, move it into outer space. And I'll never forget when I was starting to be around non-attorneys. There was this kid, he was in his late 20s kid, and he was a millionaire, self-made millionaire. And he and this other gal were talking about these masterminds that they were a part of. And I'm like, oh, well, what's that? And he's like, oh, this mastermind, blah, blah, blah. And I said, oh, well, how much is that? And he's like $100,000 a year. And I was like, what? And I'm like, well, what do you get for $100,000 a year? He's like, well, we talk to each other. And I was like, are you insane? Like, how smart can you be? Really? And then I got it. Mm-hmm. Then I got it. Like, because I started hanging out with these people and I heard what they're talking about. And, one idea, one shift in how people think or how they're viewing themselves changes the world.
I agree.
And being able to recognize when you're lying to yourself, and a good coach can point that out, invaluable. Mm-hmm. Because we can't do for ourselves what a good coach can do. That's just the bottom line.
I agree.
Or it's going to take years and years and years and years.
Well, and let's speak to the years and years, because I think a lot of lawyers, I've heard lawyers say, well, you're telling me if I hire you, I can get there like faster. And if I don't, then I'll get there, but on my own. And I always say, no, I don't know that you'll get there. And it's not because you're not smart and capable and that you can't research. Like I tell people all the time, information is prolific on Google, right?
We have never had more information in the world. And are we happier as a result?
And we don't know more, right? So you can get an answer to something, but the information is not what's causing, it didn't cause me to get from here to there like that, right? So what I always tell people is I want you to really think about this. What ends up happening is we wear ourselves out, mm-hmm. right? So especially law firm owners, right? So you're already in a profession that tends to have high demands. You're dealing with people that are at their worst. You're dealing with high stress situations. You're inundated with those. The outcomes are typically thought to be all on you, right? If you don't say the right thing or ask the right question or perform in the right way in court, you're going to have an adverse outcome for your client. So even though the judge has a role to play, the facts have a role to play, we put that blame on ourselves. And then we kind of tell that story of the heroic lawyer that, came out on the other side all on his own. And that really was a product of a lot of different things, the right case, the right facts, the right time, the right judge, whatever. But it's all us if we win, it's all us if we lose. And so we have all this pressure. And then you put that pressure cooker in the middle of a business. And if you think about it, you're becoming an infant again when you start a business, right? You don't know how to hire, fire, systematize, organize your finances. Like you don't know all of that. And
I started with a borrowed computer that was like a gazillion years old. And I was ahead of the game because a friend had said, you have to get QuickBooks. So I got QuickBooks. Another attorney was moving. So I got her used office supplies. Mm-hmm. And I had a phone book ad. Here, I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
And that's how I started.
And lots of us start that way, right? We don't know what we don't know. So we do what we can know. And we ask a lot of questions. How did you get started? Like, what is this supposed to be? Like, what do I do? Like, where's the checklist, right? And you get Thunberg's book and you start. But what you don't know and what a lot of us don't experience is that if you aren't in a place of creating what you want, which a lot of us don't, right? A lot of us are just trying to get through today, to get through the end of the week, to get through the end of the month, to get through the end of the year. And then
Right.
you can repeat year after year. But if you aren't going to something, if you aren't urgently moving yourself toward a goalpost that is exciting for you, then what tends to happen is your spirit gets weary when things start to happen. So you see all around us lawyers that are like, oh, here's another idiot I hired that showed up drunk to work, and now I can't hire anybody else. And they have, they shut down and from a place of self-protection. So this is not to denigrate people that do that. I have had that pattern for all of my life, right? Okay, go, bam, hit a wall. All right, well, that's God's way of saying no, right? And that fallacy that we tell ourselves that God punishes us by being too successful or by doing things too much, right? We're going to get the big smack on the hand from the guy upstairs. Or for those of you that don't believe in the guy upstairs, there's karma, there's fate, there's life that's going to land on you if you do something wrong. So then we baby step, right? And the baby steps sound like the safer thing to do, right? If we hit the wrong thing, we'll it won't be that hard to back it up. We'll be okay. But the problem is baby steps take more time and more energy. It is harder to go from $100,000 to $110,000 year over year than to go from 100 to 200, because
it is.
You had to do to get from step 1 to step 2 still had that same level of energy and excitement and frustration and fear. All of that was pent up for you to take that baby step. It's still pent up for you to take that bigger step. But the problem is the return is so much less. So your mind says this wasn't worth it. So you stop.
Yeah.
And then you get started again because you want to grow, because the urge of life is more life. So you're seeking more. You're all right. I'm ready to do this again. I'm ready to. All right. Well, oh crap! I hired the wrong person. That person stole something from me. Oh God! Now my clients could sue me, and now I could lose my license. So now I've got to stop doing this whole hiring thing. So I'll just do it myself. It's safer to do it myself. I don't want to have other people. And then you get tired, and those 60-hour weeks turn into 70-hour weeks, and those 70-hour weeks turn into 80-hour weeks, and those 80-hour weeks are not productive because you're tired and you make some mistakes. And then, a client files a grievance, and it just becomes a downward cycle. And then
so many attorneys are, part of why I do this is to stop, to at least hopefully get you to think for 2 seconds about, is this what I want? How is this working?
Yeah.
And I have seen so many attorneys throughout my practice where I just go, what was that about? I mean, I remember going to a bar committee meeting and seeing an old attorney that I knew years previously who had just retired. And he's talking to me, sharing with me. He was living on Social Security. He'd been practicing well over 40 years. He had nothing. But he had, done the things. I talk about, very frankly, a friend of mine, her husband, family law attorney, did this cycle, didn't want to get out of his comfort zone, didn't want to hire. He had done all of exactly what we're talking about. Overworking, balls start dropping, bar complaints start, bar hearing on Tuesday, the Friday before, he killed himself, leaving four kids and a wife. This cycle that attorneys are in is literally killing us. And if you're not killing yourself, you're overworking, or you are boozing it up or drugging it up, or we're all human. And there's got to be a lever there of release.
Right.
We are not meant to do this, is what I'm trying to say, the way that we're doing this.
Yeah. And the coping mechanisms vary from person to person.
Right.
But we all have to have a way of coping.
Right.
And I would argue that probably statistically a majority of people have an unhealthy way of coping. Some are more obvious than others, right? Super heavy people, we cope with food. Some of us cope with alcohol. Some of us choose both. Some of us cope with overspending or oversexing or overdrugging or overworking. And that's like the other, that's the legitimate way of.
Oh, it's the celebrated way, especially in this profession.
Oh yeah.
You still have attorneys bragging about working, how much they're working. It's the claim to fame.
Right.
And if you want that, I would argue nobody actually really wants that, but
I'm going to give you a contrarian view to that.
Okay.
Because I had to struggle through this, because I was one of those workaholic young attorneys that, the senior partners would actually say, you need to go home now. And I'd be like, but I've got work to do. and I'm billing all these hours. Like, you want me to bill hours, right? So then you got that, you put them in that conundrum where they can't really say no. But I struggled with that for a long time. And what I had to come to a realization of is there are some people that really do love to work because they love to create, right? And you can love to work without being a workaholic. When you, just like any other ism, right? If you're using your work or your alcohol or your food or whatever as a means of escaping, as a means of validating yourself as a person, right? So I matter because I work, or I'm a good person because I work. If you're attaching some meaning to it, that's separate and apart from the joy that you receive in it, and you can't stop yourself from that particular behavior, that's when it gets into an unhealthy pattern. But before that, like, once I kind of got out of the only reason I'm on earth is to work, and God won't love me unless I work, and I don't matter to humans unless I work.
Work till you die, baby.
Right? Just work yourself into the ground. Once I unlearned that, then I got to actually love the work, because it stopped being about that toxic, negative energy of I do this because it makes me legitimate, right? Now I do this because I enjoy it. And, it really becomes like a kind of falling in love again.
So what do you see, certainly in my program, I assume in yours, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there are people, even with all of the safeguards that I have in place, that not everybody can work with me. Mm-hmm. There are people, and I am at a good price point, going up and up. Even with all of those gates, there are still people who come in and don't do it. Mm-hmm. Don't do it. I assume that's the same with you. Mm-hmm. What do you see as the difference? What separates the people who are still scared? This is still an investment. They're still scared, and yet they feel it and they jump anyway and they do it. They go for it and they do it, versus the people who just aren't going to do it. Yeah. They're just not.
So there's a couple of thoughts that I have about that. So the first one is a quote that actually David shares a lot, which I've kind of co-opted because I love it so much. And it's a quote by Leland Val Vanderwall. And it says that the degree to which a person can grow is in direct proportion to the amount of truth they can hear about themselves without running away.
Amen. Okay, I'm going to have you say it again, and amen.
Yeah. So again, the extent to which a person can grow is directly proportional to the extent to which they can hear truth about themselves without running away. And for a lot of lawyers, the lawyers that have come into my program and have just either inched themselves ahead and said it's not worth it for me anymore, or I actually had lawyers that like significantly grew. I had a lawyer that grew over 78% in 1 year and quit, saying, oh, well, I want to spend more time with the kids. And some of that, I think, was, the spousal issue, especially when you start getting into the gender switch where, we had a traditional hypergamous relationship with the husband being the primary wage earner. And now that was shifting. And I think that shift causes relational issues for a lot of folks. But, for most people, it's that when you start pushing them, and not pushing them like we want to push you to do something that you don't want to do, but you identify for us what we want to do, and we continue to remind you of that. When you get that reminder, a lot of times people aren't just encountering the fear of, can I do this and what's it going to cost me? But they're also encountering the fear of, what if I can't do it, right? The belief system of, I don't believe that I'm capable. I don't believe that I'm worthy. I don't believe that this is for me. I see all these other people that have XYZ and I don't fit in with that club. And that runs below the surface a lot. And if you don't deal with that, if you just kind of gloss over it with the thought of, oh, I'll just work on the marketing plan, or I'll work on the system, without working on the stuff that's impeding you from working on the marketing plan or working on the system, then what'll happen is you'll spend that much time and energy and you'll be spinning your wheels. And at some point you'll be like, yeah, this is capable of helping me, but I have other priorities. So people will define themselves out of wanting the thing that they urgently wanted when they hired us. Suddenly, I would rather be, making crafts on the weekends with the kids than growing a business. Or I would rather be a lawyer and not be focused on business, and business will come over the 15, 20 years that I'm practicing. And that's all that I want, because it's easier to reduce your expectation and your goal than it is to hold firm to seeing yourself as something less than you are and having to force yourself to grow into something more. So that's usually the reason why people stop.
Yeah.
Another reason people stop is the outer pressure, right? The people on the outside. So I'm very clear with people. We don't tell you to divorce your spouse. We don't tell you to abandon your kids. We don't tell you to drop your friends. But we tell you if those people are having a negative influence, children being the exception, that you have to put a barrier around them. And that may mean either bring your spouse aboard, right? Get them enrolled in what you're doing, educate them, share with them, talk to them. We can involve them as well. They can come to your coaching calls. They can hear what you're hearing. They can come to retreats, but let them see and experience where this is going to be beneficial for them, because all people are self-motivated, right? We all want what we want. So if you're changing and you're evolving and you're not involving your spouse in that, that's a risk to the relationship, and they're right to be concerned.
Yeah. And all of these self-sabotage, it shows up in other areas of people's lives as well. Mm-hmm. And I tell my students, it's critical that you start unpacking and seeing the invisible barriers. Because if you think that you want to make X amount of money, but for whatever reason, subconsciously, it's not safe to do that, you won't do it. I don't care what program you get. I don't care who you pay. You will self-sabotage at every turn. So going inward, there's no substitute. You have to do it, I think. I mean, you just have to, at least in my experience with myself and everyone else. That is the thing. Exactly what you quoted. Yeah. You have to know yourself and be willing to hear other people's reflection that you don't see.
Right. And for those that are hearing this thinking, oh my God, this sounds like therapy.
It is.
In many ways it is, but I will tell people this, that, there are times where you put the foot on the gas and there are times where you take the foot off the gas. Right. So I've had this question several times with lawyers. And I remember when I first started coaching, people would be like, well, a year is a long time and I don't know if I'm going to like it. So, can we do 6 months? I don't know what my financial circumstances are going to be. And I'm like, at one point I would meet people where they are and I'd be like, okay, we'll sign you up for 6 months. And, assuming that you do everything that we ask of you, if you don't grow, because there's a metric, right? It's not just if you feel like stopping, but if you don't grow, we'll let you out. And then I said, you know what? I'm not doing that anymore. You came here because you know that I'm able to help you. And the way that I help you is not by giving you the false sense of reality that you would like to hold on to, but it's actually requiring you to step in the faith of what we know that we can help you to do. But part of that journey, that year, and it's rarely a year for people that actually start to see success, they stay with us for many years. But that journey is not linear. You go up and down, right? And the up and down is not in your revenue necessarily. The up and down is in your emotions.
It's all absolutely.
So there are some times where you're hiring and you hire somebody and you go through this long process, because a lot of lawyers, now that I've learned how to actually hire somebody, I teach them a process that weeds out, right? So we start with a whole lot of people and our goal is to get that funnel down, because we want the right person, not just any person.
Right.
And they go through that process and they go all through and they answer the questions and they do the stuff. And then they get that right person, they make an offer, that person says yes, and then that person doesn't show up on the first day and says, never mind. Or they go through that whole process and they get the right person in. And then 2 weeks after they start, somebody in their family dies. They have to move across the country. They quit, and you say, well, I could have gotten that if I had just winged it and, picked somebody out of a lineup. And the answer is maybe not, but you are increasing the likelihood.
Right.
And when you do it the right way, what will often happen is the energy that you bring to that, if it's conflicted, if 1 minute you're like, yes, I'm all in, and the next minute you're like, no, I'm not so sure, that also gets communicated into the person that you're speaking to, and that also creates a reverberation for them. But that whole process is a process. So you have to go through success and failure to see that there is success on the other side of failure.
And failure. And we all learn from the failures. That's where you learn.
Right. And the people that can't sit with the idea of, I'm going to go on a journey, and through that journey, I'm going to have highs and lows. And there are going to be moments where I'm seeing myself and I can't take it and I cry and I just need to break down a little bit. And those are the times where we say, here, go read something, go watch something, go consume something that keeps your mind focused on your business in a smaller way, right? We don't have to be at the bottom of the chasm in the misery of the pain all the time. But you do have to go there in order for us to be able to help you think your way through, so that as you're approaching problems in the future, you're ultimately able to get there.
Yeah. It really is a journey. Well, it's personal development in so many ways.
You can't develop yourself in a 30-minute course or or a 1-week boot camp. Like, it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work. I mean, if only, but it didn't take you a day to get here. It's not going to take you a day to heal. And a lot of the times that's exactly what we're talking about. We attorneys, we like to think that we're, logical and we're not emotional and somehow we're not human in many ways. We are. And it shows up. It shows up all of the time. Our past shows up and it affects what we're doing. And until you start examining that, you're going to keep doing it.
Absolutely.
Right? Oh, so I'm going to put Allison's information for the law firm mentor in the below. Great coach. You can see how she's not going to take BS. Not going to take BS.
She's not.
And, she does the whole spectrum. And my personal view is that, people are worth it. It's interesting to me, especially when talking to parents. We have no problem paying extracurricular activity fees. We have no problem paying for nannies and all of the things for all of the other people. And then when it's like, oh, coaching for me? And what I say is, even if it's not just about the return of investment, that's fine. The money's fine. But you're talking about you being worth it just because you're a human being and you're worth this growth.
Yeah.
But it's hard to wrap your head around it a little sometimes. But for me, coaching has changed everything in my life.
I agree with that.
Period.
I agree with that. In fact, I tell people this all the time because I've had my own mental health journey, right? So I tell people I'm a recovering alcoholic, and I tell people that I went through a very severe depression and almost took my life. And my therapist is ultimately the person that saved my life, but my coach was the person that made my life worth living. That's the distinction.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Oh, well, I'm glad to be on this journey with you, my friend. And I will put all of the links below if you want to get to know more about Allison and law firm mentoring. The link is below. So thank you.
Thank you for having me, Brita.